Teachers of Reddit. What is the most disturbing thing you've heard a student say? Paraprofessional in an elementary school. A kid looked at me and casually said, "My mom died Sunday. Her funeral is next week." And shrugged. I had a student tell me about his parents leaving salt around the house. Bizarre. But I didn't connect the dots until they were arrested. Turns out, that was cocaine. I'm a little late. I had a student who was deathly afraid of using the bathroom because monsters who wanted to get her were in the vents. Turns out her dad used to abuse her in the bathroom. A 6-year-old barely getting out the words. "My mama choked me." Between tears. A second grader having a full meltdown about his low grade, saying his dad was going to make him sleep outside again if he found out. These are some of the things that keep us up at night. Heartbreaking. During my second year student teaching, a teaching unpaid internship, a student brought a few bags of heroin to school in his backpack. He pulled them out in the hallway to show his friends before recess. He said, "I brought treasure from home. My mom says it's worth more than me." The kids were oohing and awing. The most fucked up part is that the school expelled him. We didn't help him at all. I think about him still. 9 years later. One of my students' parents were fighting. Dad left home then came back to talk. They went out to the car to fight so the kids wouldn't hear. He shot and killed the mother then himself. The girl came to school the next day and just said, "I have nowhere else to go." While student teaching. Had a student shout, "You guys wanna see the gun in my backpack?" He was trying to joke. But security was called and the intervention specialist kept all students away from the bag. Coached elementary PE. Had a 9-year-old student call me in. Infested tampon sucker. More surprised than angry. At the time I was 23 and never heard an insult like that. One of my students threatened to kill my dog while I was out walking her. This was after he had cussed me out, ripped up his work, and disturbed the class. It was his second day in class. My dad wants to kill me with his hunting gun. 9 years old. It wasn't a student, but his father. A guy came up to me on parents' night and told me to call him if his kid needed a good yelling. Since his kid was such a useless fuck up. While I stood there in shock. He added, "He's always been lazy. But he's been worse since his roommate at his last school killed himself. Don't hesitate to call me if he pulls that bullshit. Fuck that guy." That his abuser used to stuff socks in his mouth while he beat him up so he couldn't scream. I was teaching a high school jewelry metal shop class and some students alerted me to one student trying to sneak out some of the metal files. When confronted, he said he wanted to use them to stab people in the halls. I had him removed permanently, to say the least. I once had a piano student who said he couldn't practice at home because his stepfather would beat him to have to listen to it. No one knows where my mom and dad are. Or if they're even alive. Logan. A kid in a class once subbed for who was being raised by his grandmother. A kindergarten. Student drew a picture of himself floating in outer space smiling and pointing at a giant red button on his spacesuit. I asked what the button was for. He said, "It's so I can suicide myself so I can be with Jesus." His completely embarrassed mother responded to my concerned email explaining that this portrait was likely the fruit of 2 separate conversations she'd had with him that week. The first explaining suicide bombers. The second explaining that his recently deceased grandfather was in a better place with Jesus. Kids are wild. This one student once told me, unprompted, "I like red cars. Because that's the color of car my mom used when she left us to do drugs." Second grade teacher here. A student recently told me his parents have a vibrating bed. I had to hold back laughing. During a class field trip, a girl in class casually mentioned before everybody that the road we were driving down was the same one she'd tried to kill herself on the year before because she was bullied so badly. She said she'd been driving and floored it, hoping to hit a tree. Only to change her mind because she didn't want to hurt her family. It just came out of nowhere, and from the girl who was generally considered incredibly popular. Kind. And well liked. We saw our neighbor die last night. Completely deadpan. Me. Oh my goodness. What happened? Are you okay? Them. He was racing his lawnmower and it dragged him to death. It went really fast. Me. Are you okay? Would you like to talk to the counselor? Them. Nah. We're fine. We've seen it before. Them equals twin 7th grade boys in the Ozarks of the southern Midwest. USA. My student recently told a story about how her dog died. She said she was stay with her aunt for a few weeks over the summer and her dog was home with her mom when the student returned home. She asked for the dog. Mom said she didn't know where the dog was and told the student to look upstairs. The student found the dog dead in an unused bedroom. Mom's reaction was, "Oh, I guess I forgot to feed him." Student now lives with the aunt full time because mom often forgot to feed the kid too. I had a student, under 10, tell me he wanted to cut my head off and watch me bleed. I had the audacity to tell him that he needed to put his crayons up before he could get his Play-Doh out. I had a senior student describe to a friend in class how she was going to fuck her boyfriend that night. The boyfriend is also a student at school. It got disturbing when she asked me for my opinion. He, 6th grade, came to school with a bruised face and told me he got pistol whipped and his dad got murdered the week before. This kiddo cried in my arms. I let him sit in my class with his head down all day. He missed school for a bit a couple weeks later and I was worried sick. His girlfriend told me he was in juvie for weed. It kept happening but substances got harder. I think about that baby all the time. By 7th grade he was too hard to open up to me and we didn't keep in touch. I think about him and his girlfriend. Another favorite student. Constantly trying to convince a 17-year-old student that drugs are not the way to go and that he has a full life ahead of him when he says, "Doesn't matter. I'm gonna be dead or in jail by the time I'm 25. He had been told he was nothing his whole life and he absolutely believed it. Spent up until he graduated trying to prove him wrong. Edit. Oh goodness. Thank you kind Redditors for the awards. Unfortunately, I have since left teaching at that school and don't have a way to contact him. Last we talked, he was thinking of trade school. Last weekend I sent positive emails to the families of all of my students. Because remote learning is hard and the kids are really stepping up. On Tuesday, when I saw one of my classes for the first time since sending the messages, a girl said to me, "That email you sent made my dad happy. He doesn't like me that much. And it made him like me." My heart broke for that poor girl. She's bright, friendly, and hardworking. I asked her, privately, if she was safe at home and if there was anything I could do to help. She told me her dad liked her brother much better. My mom's a teacher and she says there was a student that used to make these little paper drug packets and he didn't even know what they were. She says that the mother was a drug dealer and would make him make them all day long if he wasn't in school. Safe to say the police were involved after certain things happened. Like her never turning up to the school to collect him one night and other stuff. Pretty weird how a child was making literal drug packets and had no idea. He was just proud of them because that was the only thing he was taught how to do at home. I had a girl tell me her father had raped her from the age of 3 to 7. She started out difficult and by the time she graduated we had formed a great bond. 1 year. I was teaching K at a Title I school and one of my students came to school with a band-aid on her forehead. I asked her what happened and she told me her dad had thrown a book at her head and made her bleed. I called CPS and was later told the school counselor that she was removed from the home because dad was physically and sexually abusing her. Edited to fix my typo.